Get out of here and stop pretending. The words, sharp and cold, were directed at a 9-year-old girl trembling in seat 27C. Her name was Jessica Harrison, and her small hands gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her whole body was seized by an uncontrollable tremor. This wasn't a fear of flying. It wasn't a panic attack. What was happening to Jessica was far more dangerous. Looming over her in the aisle stood flight attendant Sarah Mitchell, arms crossed, her face a mask of pure irritation. Jessica's plea was barely a whisper, a desperate, fading sound. She was begging for water. Just water. But Sarah's response cut through the cabin like a shard of glass. "I'm not your slave, young lady. You can get a drink when we land, like everyone else." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby rows. Some passengers were visibly horrified, their faces slack with disbelief. An elderly woman in the adjacent seat, her hands shaking with rage, began recording on her phone. Across the aisle, a retired paramedic stood up, his voice booming with authority. "Sarah, help this child immediately." But others nodded in silent agreement with the flight attendant. A man a few rows back called out, "She's right. Kids these days think they're entitled to everything." A younger woman chimed in, "I mean, if she has special needs, her parents should have packed her own snacks." The cabin fractured. Half the passengers were shouting at Sarah to do something, anything, to help the girl. The other half defended her, insisting she was just doing her job, that the child was being dramatic, that parents expected the world to cater to their children. And Jessica? Her vision was blurring at the edges, her eyes beginning to roll back. Her 9-year-old body was losing its fight against the silent war waging within. Her blood sugar had plummeted to a dangerously low level. She had known it for 20 minutes. It's why she'd pressed the call button, why she'd begged for juice before settling for a simple plea for water. It's why she was now teetering on the edge of a medical catastrophe at 30,000 feet, while the one person who could help her was convinced she was just another spoiled child. And then, everything changed. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, a sudden, authoritative sound that sliced through every argument and every gasp. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been ordered to make an emergency landing in Atlanta. Please return to your seats and prepare for an immediate descent." Confusion detonated in the cabin. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed, frantic glances. An emergency landing? The flight had been perfectly smooth. What could possibly be so wrong? The plane banked hard to the right, beginning a rapid descent toward the unseen city below. In her seat, Jessica slumped, barely conscious, as the retired paramedic, Mr. Thompson, tried desperately to keep her awake. He had managed to get some juice for her from another attendant, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The plane touched down in Atlanta with a jarring thud. It didn't taxi to a gate. Instead, it came to an abrupt halt on the tarmac, instantly encircled by a swarm of emergency vehicles, ambulances, airport security, fire trucks, their lights painting the cabin in silent, strobing flashes of red and blue. The cabin doors flew open, and a team of paramedics rushed aboard, their movements swift and purposeful as they headed straight for row 27. They surrounded Jessica, checking her vitals, starting an IV, preparing her for a stretcher. Mr. Thompson quickly briefed them on her condition, the critical blood sugar levels, the time she'd been in distress. Behind the paramedics, a procession of officials boarded, airline supervisors, security officers. And then, one more person. A tall man in an expensive business suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, but his face told a different story. It was a mask of controlled fury, the kind of anger that doesn't explode, but burns with a cold, lethal intensity. He walked down the aisle with an unnerving purpose, his eyes locked on row 27. Passengers shrank back, instinctively sensing the immense power that radiated from him. He reached Jessica just as the paramedics were lifting her onto the stretcher. For a single, heartbreaking moment, his composure cracked. His hand gently touched her face, and his voice broke as he whispered her name. Sarah Mitchell stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold with a baffled expression. Who was this man? Why was he here? Then, a passenger nearby whispered to another, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "That's Marcus Harrison, the CEO." In an instant, Sarah's face transformed. The confusion vanished. The defiance crumbled. It was replaced by a look of pure, absolute terror. A realization, so horrifying it made her blood run cold, crashed down upon her. The little girl she had dismissed and demeaned for the last half hour wasn't just any passenger. She was the daughter of Marcus Harrison, the man who owned Skyline Airlines, the man who employed every single person on this aircraft, the man who had just grounded an entire flight because his child was in danger, and his flight attendant had refused to help. Sarah's hands began to shake. Her confident smirk collapsed as she watched Marcus Harrison kneel beside his daughter's stretcher, his hand gripping hers, his voice now steady and sure as he promised her everything would be okay. And in that moment, Sarah knew her career was over. Her life as she knew it was over, because she had just told the CEO's diabetic daughter that she wasn't her slave, while the child was begging for a sip of water to save her own life. The story of that day, however, began not at 30,000 feet, but 6 hours earlier, on the ground, where the quiet hum of an airport terminal concealed the first link in a chain of events that would lead to a father's worst nightmare, and ultimately, change an entire industry. 6 hours earlier, Chicago O'Hare International Airport buzzed with its typical morning chaos. Amid the throng of travelers was a 9-year-old girl named Jessica Harrison, her hair in neat cornrows decorated with purple beads, a matching backpack covered in stickers of NASA rockets and famous scientists. At the departure gate, her mother, Jennifer, was on her knees, going through Jessica's diabetes kit one last time. A nurse at a community clinic, she was still in her scrubs under a jacket, her face etched with the exhaustion of a night shift. "What do you do if you feel shaky?" Jennifer asked, her voice a practiced, gentle drill. Jessica recited the protocol. "Check my blood sugar. If it's below 70, I eat 3 glucose tablets and wait 15 minutes. And if you don't have your tablets? I ask for juice or regular soda, not diet. I tell them it's a medical emergency." Jennifer nodded, tucking the kit into Jessica's backpack before pulling out a bag of snacks. "Eat something every 2 hours, okay? Even if you're not hungry." A few feet away, Marcus Harrison watched them, his anxiety barely concealed. In a modest navy suit, he looked like any other businessman. "She's too young to fly alone," he said quietly to Jennifer. "What if something happens?" Jennifer's voice was laced with frustration. "Marcus, this was your idea. You scheduled the last-minute trip. You suggested she fly ahead." He had emergency board meetings he couldn't miss. He'd booked Jessica on the 10 a.m. flight, planning to follow on a later one that evening. "I know, but..." "She's 9, Marcus. She's responsible. The flight attendants will look after her. She'll be fine." Seeing Jessica watching them with a worried expression, Marcus knelt beside her. "Hey, baby girl. Ready for your big adventure?" "Are you mad, Daddy?" "No, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm just gonna miss you." He pressed a $20 bill into her hand. "Emergency money." "Mom already gave me some." "Well, now you have double." He tapped her backpack. "Phone's charged? You know our numbers?" "Yes, Daddy." After a final check of her unaccompanied minor badge, Jennifer walked Jessica to the gate agent. Marcus and Jennifer watched their daughter disappear down the jetway, her purple backpack bouncing, her light-up shoes flashing with every step. "She'll be fine," Jennifer repeated, more to convince herself than him. "She will," Marcus agreed, though his voice lacked conviction. The plan was simple. He'd finish his meetings, catch the 5 p.m. flight, and be with his family by 8. It was a perfectly logical, efficient plan. He had no way of knowing that in less than 2 hours, it would be shattered by the worst phone call of his life. At the aircraft door, Jessica was met by 2 flight attendants, James, a warm man in his 30s, and Sarah Mitchell, a woman in her late 40s whose professional smile seemed brittle. When the gate agent introduced Jessica as an unaccompanied minor in 27C, Sarah's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of cold indifference. "Do you know how to buckle your seatbelt?" she asked sharply. Jessica nodded. "Good, go on then." Sarah turned away, her attention already on the next passenger. Jessica made her way down the aisle and found her seat. A kind-faced older woman named Dorothy sat next to her. "First time flying alone?" she asked with a warm smile. "How exciting. If you need anything, dear, I'm right here." Soon after, a family boarded, a mother with 2 young children. Instantly, Sarah Mitchell transformed. Her voice became warm and musical as she rushed to help them, dabbing at spilled juice on the little boy's shirt. "Kids will be kids," she cooed, bringing them activity packs and promising them extra cookies. Each time she passed Jessica's row, she ignored her, but she stopped twice to fuss over the other children. Dorothy noticed the disparity, the warmth for the white children, the icy dismissal for the black child. But for now, She said nothing. 45 minutes into the flight, Jessica felt the first faint flutter of alarm, a slight tremor in her hands. She checked her blood sugar. 110. Normal, but she knew her body. She ate the crackers her mother had packed. An hour later, beverage service began. Sarah gushed over the little girl, Emma, bringing her apple juice and extra cookies as promised. When the cart reached row 27, her expression went flat. You? May I have apple juice, please? Jessica asked politely. Sarah sighed. We're out. Oh. Orange juice then? Her jaw tightened. 1 drink per passenger. What do you want? Water, please, Jessica whispered, her face flushing. Sarah slammed a cup down, barely half-filled it, and handed it to her without a word before moving on. Jessica stared at the meager amount of water as the plane flew on through the clear, sunlit sky, carrying her toward the most terrifying experience of her young life. 30 minutes later, the words in her book began to swim. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She knew this feeling all too well. Her blood sugar was dropping. She pricked her finger. The meter beeped. 72. Not critical yet, but falling fast. She reached into her pocket for her glucose tablets. They weren't there. She checked the other pocket. Nothing. Panic began to coil in her stomach. They must have fallen out. Don't panic, her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Ask for juice. They are there to help you. Jessica pressed the call button. 1 minute passed. Then 2. 5. No one came. She pressed it again, holding it down, her hands shaking harder now. Finally, Sarah Mitchell appeared, her face a thundercloud of annoyance. What is it? She snapped. Jessica's voice was small, trembling. I have diabetes. My sugar is low. Can I please have some juice? Sarah's face hardened. Beverage service is over. You already had your drink. Tears pricked Jessica's eyes. But I need it. My mom said... Sarah cut her off. Then your mother should have packed you what you need. Snack service isn't for another hour, the flight attendant said, her voice clipped as she turned to leave. Dorothy, who had been observing the exchange with a knot of concern tightening in her stomach, leaned into the aisle. Excuse me, she began, her voice gentle but firm. She said she has diabetes. Surely that's a medical issue. Sarah, the attendant, pivoted back. The professional annoyance on her face had curdled into something harder, colder, anger. Ma'am, she said, her tone dripping with ice. I don't require passengers to tell me how to do my job. She walked away, leaving Jessica in a pool of silent tears. They streamed down her face as a tremor, born deep in her cells, took hold of her hands. The cabin around her blurred into a watercolor of fear. Dorothy reached across the small space, her hand covering Jessica's. Honey, how low is your sugar? Jessica could barely force the words out. 72, but it's dropping. I can feel it. Alarm flashed in Dorothy's eyes. Her own grandson was diabetic. She knew what this meant. She knew how quickly the cliff's edge could appear. Do you have anything at all to eat? Anything with sugar? Jessica shook her head, a gesture of pure despair. I ate my snacks. I forgot to save some. My glucose tablets. They must have fallen out of my pocket. Oh, sweetheart. Dorothy's hands dove into her purse, a frantic search through a lifetime of receipts and tissues. She emerged with a can of soda, pressing it into Jessica's hand. Here, drink this. Jessica's trembling fingers could barely grip the can, her blurry eyes struggling to focus on the label. Diet Coke. 0 sugar, 0 calories. The flicker of hope in her chest was extinguished. The tears came harder now, silent sobs shaking her small frame. It's diet, she whispered. I need regular. It has to have sugar. Dorothy's face fell. Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. I only drink diet. Let me ask around. She turned to the nearby passengers, her voice carrying a new urgency. Excuse me, does anyone have a regular soda? Not diet. This little girl has diabetes and needs sugar quickly. A few people shook their heads, offering apologetic glances. Others remained buried in their phones and books, cocooned in a bubble of willful ignorance, not wanting to be involved. Jessica fumbled with her glucose meter again, her fingers feeling clumsy and disconnected. 65. It had dropped 7 points in mere minutes. At this rate, the cliff's edge was rushing toward her. Across the aisle, a middle-aged black man had been observing the unfolding drama with a practiced, assessing gaze. His name was Mr. Thompson, a retired paramedic who had seen this scene play out too many times in the back of an ambulance. He recognized the pale skin, the subtle tremor, the quiet desperation of a body starving for sugar. He leaned across the aisle. "Young sister, are you okay?" Jessica looked up, tears streaking her face, and shook her head. "I have diabetes. My blood sugar is really low. I need juice or soda, but the flight attendant said no." A shadow crossed Mr. Thompson's face. He unbuckled his seatbelt, his movements deliberate, and pressed the call button above his head. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. We're going to get you some help." 3 long minutes passed before Sarah reappeared. When she saw Mr. Thompson standing in the aisle, her expression soured with a mixture of irritation and disdain. "Sir, you need to return to your seat." Mr. Thompson's voice was calm, but it held an authority forged over decades of life-or-death situations. "This child is having a diabetic emergency. Her blood sugar is at a dangerous level. She needs juice or a regular soda immediately." Sarah's response was a dismissive wave of her hand. She already asked. "I told her beverage service is over." "I don't give a damn about your beverage service schedule," he said, his voice rising just enough to command attention. "This child needs sugar now or she's going to lose consciousness." Sarah's tone turned condescending, almost mocking. "Sir, all children claim they need candy and juice. She's fine. She can wait." From 2 rows back, a white man in his 50s named Richard chimed in. "The attendant's right. Kids these days are so entitled. My kids learned patience." A younger white woman named Ashley nodded. "I mean, if she has special needs, she should have been prepared. It's not the airline's fault." Dorothy's voice cut through the air, sharp with fury. "She is 9 years old. This isn't about being spoiled. It's a medical crisis." But the cabin was fracturing. Half the passengers stared in horror. The other half seemed to nod along with Sarah, seeing not a child in distress, but a problem of entitlement. Bolstered by the support, Sarah straightened her shoulders. "Exactly. Personal responsibility. Now I need everyone to calm down." Mr. Thompson didn't move an inch. "I am a retired paramedic. I know what a hypoglycemic episode looks like, and this child is minutes away from one. Get her the juice, now." Sarah's face flushed a deep red. She felt cornered, her authority challenged, and she doubled down. "Sir, if you do not sit down, I will be forced to report you for disruptive behavior." At that, Dorothy pulled out her phone and began recording. Sarah's eyes darted to the small lens. "Ma'am, recording crew members is against airline policy." Dorothy's voice was steel. "So is letting a child die." Richard called out again. "Oh, for God's sake, the woman is just doing her job. Stop being so dramatic." It was then that a young Latina woman named Maria, who had been a silent, simmering witness, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of an accusation. "I saw you give that white family in front of me extra juice and cookies, and they didn't even ask. You've been past them twice to see if they needed anything. But this little girl, this black child, tells you she's having a medical emergency and you refuse? That's not doing your job. That's discrimination." Sarah's face went from red to a blotchy purple. "That was different. They have 2 children. And this child has diabetes," Maria shot back. The argument exploded. Voices rose, passengers yelled at each other, some defending Sarah, others demanding she act. The cabin descended into chaos. And through it all, Jessica sat slumped in her seat, the world around her fading. Her fingers, clumsy and disobedient, fumbled with the meter one more time. The world was slowing down, turning to thick, syrupy water. 58. The number flashed on the tiny screen, a digital death sentence. Her vision was tunneling, her speech beginning to slur. Her body was shutting down. Mr. Thompson saw the reading and his face went pale. He pushed past Sarah without asking permission, his movements swift and sure, and knelt in the aisle beside Jessica. He felt for her pulse, rapid and thready. Her pupils were dilated. Her skin was cold and clammy to the touch. "She's in serious trouble," he announced, his voice cutting through the din. "We need to get sugar into her system right now or she will lose consciousness." Sarah stood watching, her arms crossed, a statue of obstinance. "I am not opening that beverage cart outside of service hours. There are company inventory procedures." Mr. Thompson's voice boomed through the cabin. "To hell with your inventory procedures. This child is going into hypoglycemic shock." Suddenly, a different voice cut through the noise. Karen, the mother Sarah had been so attentive to earlier, was on her feet. She'd seen Sarah's warmth toward her own children and the chilling coldness directed at this one. She'd watched as a flight attendant valued rules over a human life. "Wait," she called out. "I have juice boxes for my kids. Here!" She rushed down the aisle and thrust a small box into Mr. Thompson's hand. He took it gratefully, tearing it open. "Jessica, honey, I need you to drink this. Just small sips." Sarah tried to intervene. "You cannot give food to other passengers. That's against—" Dorothy cut her off, her voice like a razor. "Are you seriously trying to stop someone from helping this baby?" From his seat, Richard mumbled, "Technically, she's right. Liability issues." But the collective glare of half the cabin silenced him, and he shrank into his seat. Mr. Thompson held the juice to Jessica's lips. She managed a few weak sips, her own hands too unsteady to hold the box. The sweet orange juice was a desperate lifeline, but it wasn't enough. One small box couldn't reverse a fall this steep. She was still barely conscious, slumping further into her seat. Sarah watched, her arms still crossed. "Fine, but I am filing a report on all of you. Disruptive passengers, failing to follow crew instructions." Mr. Thompson looked up at her, his voice now pleading. "She needs more. One box isn't enough for how low she is. Please, just one more juice. Look at her." He gestured to Jessica, who was pale as a ghost, her eyes beginning to roll back. For a fleeting second, something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Doubt, maybe even concern. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Her jaw set like concrete. Backing down now meant admitting she was wrong, admitting she had endangered a child, and her pride, a fragile, brittle thing, refused to break. Her voice came out cold, dripping with a venom that shocked the cabin into silence. "I already told you. Inventory procedures exist for a reason. I am not your slave, and I'm certainly not hers." The words dropped into the cabin like a stone, and the chaotic noise shattered into an absolute ringing silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Dorothy gasped. Did you really just say that?" Maria, who had never stopped recording, raised her phone higher. "Oh, this is definitely being documented." Even Richard looked uneasy. "Okay, that was a bit much." Sarah realized her catastrophic error. Her face paled as the weight of her words landed. I meant I'm not a servant. You people are twisting my words." Mr. Thompson's voice went dangerously quiet. "You people?" The tension became explosive. Sarah tried again. "I didn't mean it like that. I just meant—" But it was too late. No one was listening. Dorothy turned her back on the attendant, focusing completely on Jessica, stroking her hair. Mr. Thompson continued to monitor the child's vitals, his face a mask of controlled rage. Jessica was fading fast. "Does anyone else have anything?" Mr. Thompson asked desperately. "Juice, candy, anything?" A few people rummaged through their bags but came up empty. "The beverage cart is right there," Maria said, pointing. 10 feet away, full of everything she needs, and you won't open it." Sarah flushed again, stammering, "I've explained the policy." But her defenders had fallen silent. This was no longer about rules. This was about a child, possibly dying, and an adult who refused to help. Dorothy held Jessica close, the little girl's head resting on her shoulder, her breathing shallow and labored. "Sweetheart, stay with me," she whispered. "Help is coming." But they were at 30,000 feet, and help was nowhere in sight. And then a new sound cut through the suffocating tension. The crackle of the plane's intercom. The pilot's voice filled the cabin, calm but with an unmistakable undercurrent of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been ordered to make an emergency landing in Atlanta. Please return to your seats immediately and prepare for descent." The cabin erupted in confused murmurs. An emergency landing? Why? Sarah's face went white. She hadn't called for this. Who did? How? The plane banked hard, beginning a descent so rapid that passengers grabbed their armrests, their ears popping with the pressure change. Mr. Thompson secured Jessica in her seatbelt, while Dorothy held her hand, a lifeline in the disorienting fall. The plane didn't taxi to a gate. It came to a hard stop on the open tarmac, suddenly surrounded by a sea of flashing lights, ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, a silent, urgent ballet. The cabin doors flew open. Paramedics stormed the aisle, their equipment clattering, heading directly for row 27 as if guided by an invisible hand. The lead paramedic, a black woman named Andrea, knelt by Jessica and began taking vitals. "What's her name?" "Jessica," Dorothy supplied. "Her blood sugar was 58 about 10 minutes ago." "She had about 4 ounces of orange juice 8 minutes ago," Mr. Thompson added. Andrea pricked Jessica's finger. 55. Still dropping. "We need to get her to the hospital, now." As her team worked, more people boarded the plane. Airport security, airline supervisors, and finally, a figure who commanded the space instantly. A tall black man in an impeccably tailored business suit, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He strode down the aisle, his presence parting the passengers like the sea. He reached row 27 just as Jessica was being lifted onto a stretcher. For a moment, his control cracked. "Jessica." His voice broke as he touched her face. "Baby, Daddy's here." Jessica's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" "I've got you," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Sarah stood frozen, watching in confusion. Who was this man? A passenger nearby whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "That's Marcus Harrison, the CEO." The confusion on Sarah's face dissolved, replaced by a wave of pure, abject terror. And in that devastating moment of recognition, Sarah Mitchell understood. The little girl she had dismissed, denied, and insulted was not just any passenger. She was the daughter of Marcus Harrison, the man who owned Skyline Airlines, the man who owned the very sky she flew in. She watched him kneel beside his daughter, promising her everything would be okay, and she knew with a certainty that hollowed out her soul that her life was over. Now, before we see the fallout of that realization, I want you to ask yourself a question. How many times have you been a bystander? How many times have you seen an injustice and told yourself it wasn't your business? This story is a testament to the fact that silence is a choice, and looking away has a cost. If you feel the weight of that choice, if this story is resonating in that quiet place where you've stayed silent or spoken up, then make sure you're subscribed, because the storm that is about to break is one you will not want to miss. Just an hour earlier, Marcus Harrison had been in a Chicago boardroom commanding a table of executives. Then his phone buzzed, an unknown number. A flicker of instinct made him excuse himself. "Mr. Harrison?" a frantic voice said. "My name is Dorothy Chen. I'm on flight 2847. Your daughter is on this plane and she is in serious trouble." The blood drained from his face. The quarterly reports, the profit margins, all of it evaporated into a single, terrifying reality. "What's wrong?" Dorothy explained everything. The low blood sugar, the flight attendant's refusal, the chaos. He could hear his daughter's weak voice in the background. "Put her on the phone." Dorothy held the phone to Jessica's ear. "Baby, can you hear Daddy?" Jessica's slurred, faint voice came through. "Daddy, I don't feel good." Marcus's hand shook as he ran for the elevator. "I know, baby, Daddy's going to fix this. Just hold on." He hung up and immediately dialed the airline's emergency operations center. "This is Marcus Harrison. I need you to listen very carefully. Flight 22847 has a medical emergency. My 9-year-old daughter is experiencing severe hypoglycemia and your crew has refused to assist." The operator stammered. "Mr. Harrison, let me get—" "No." Marcus's voice was like steel. "You will contact that flight right now. You will tell the pilot to divert to the nearest airport, and you will tell him he is carrying my daughter. I want paramedics on the tarmac and you're patching me through to the captain, now." He didn't wait for a reply, sprinting through the lobby to a waiting town car. "O'Hare!" he barked, slamming the door. "As fast as you can." 30 seconds later, Marcus was connected. "Captain, this is Marcus Harrison. I am ordering you to make an emergency landing. There is a 9-year-old diabetic child on your aircraft in a severe medical crisis." Captain Reynolds' voice was pure professionalism. "Mr. Harrison, we're beginning our descent into Atlanta immediately. Our ETA is 20 minutes. I'm sending my first officer back to assess the situation now." "Captain," Marcus added, his voice tight. "The flight attendant's name is Sarah Mitchell. She's the one who refused to help my daughter. Make a note of that." The captain's tone sharpened. "Noted, sir. We'll have medical personnel meet us on the tarmac." Marcus stared out the window, the Chicago skyline blurring into a meaningless streak of light. "I'm on my way to Atlanta. Just keep my daughter alive until I get there." Aboard Flight 2847, a sudden, gut-wrenching bank to the right jolted passengers from their quiet. The cockpit door opened, and the first officer emerged, hurrying down the aisle to row 27. He saw the scene, A little girl, Jessica, slumped in her seat, and a man, Mr. Thompson, kneeling beside her. "Everyone please give us some space." "Sir," he said, turning to Thompson, "you said you're a paramedic?" Mr. Thompson nodded. 25 years. "This child's blood sugar is critically low. She needs IV glucose, but all we have is juice." The first officer grabbed juice boxes from the medical kit. Together, they tried to get more of the liquid into Jessica, but she could barely swallow. He keyed his radio. "Captain, the child is critical. Blood glucose is at 58 and falling. She needs immediate medical attention." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an emergency landing at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Please return to your seats immediately and prepare for a priority landing." Confusion rippled through the cabin. Startled passengers woken from their sleep began demanding to know what was happening. In the galley, Sarah stood frozen, her face a pale mask. James, another flight attendant, approached her. "Sarah, what happened back there?" Her voice trembled. "I didn't know. I thought she was just being difficult." James's expression hardened into contempt. "She told you she had diabetes," he said, his voice low and hard. "She told you her sugar was low. She's a child, Sarah, a 9-year-old child. What in God's name were you thinking?" The plane descended with terrifying speed. Jessica was now barely conscious, with Mr. Thompson and the first officer flanking her. Dorothy held her hand, whispering, "Hold on, sweetie. Just a few more minutes." They landed hard. Before the plane had even taxied to a stop, passengers peered out the windows to see a chilling welcome. A small army of ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars, their lights painting the tarmac in silent, strobing reds and blues. The cabin doors flew open and paramedics stormed the plane, heading straight for row 27. The lead paramedic, Andrea, knelt beside Jessica. "What's her name?" "Jessica Harrison, type 1 diabetes. Her sugar dropped to 58 about 10 minutes ago." "How much sugar has she had?" "About 8 ounces, 2 juice boxes over 15 minutes. Andrea pricked Jessica's finger. The meter read 55. "Still dropping. We need to get her to the hospital now." Her team moved with practiced efficiency, starting an IV and preparing a stretcher. Behind them, more people boarded, airport security, airline supervisors, and then one more person. A tall black man in an expensive business suit who walked down the aisle with an unnerving purpose. Passengers instinctively moved aside. He reached row 27 just as the paramedics were lifting Jessica onto the stretcher. The mask of corporate control he wore shattered. "Jessica," he breathed, his voice cracking on her name. He reached out and gently touched her face. "Baby, Daddy's here. I'm here now." Jessica's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby, I've got you. You're going to be okay." Sarah stood watching, a knot of confusion in her stomach. Who was this man? Then a passenger nearby whispered, "That's Marcus Harrison, the CEO of Skyline Airlines." The words hit her like a physical blow. Confusion curdled into a cold, bottomless terror. The little girl, the one she'd dismissed, was the CEO's daughter. The man who owned the entire airline had just grounded a flight because she wouldn't give his diabetic daughter a carton of juice. Her hands began to shake violently as she watched Marcus kneel beside the stretcher, gripping his daughter's hand. As they carried Jessica past her, Marcus's eyes locked onto hers. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Airport security approached Sarah. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. There are some questions about this incident." "I want to speak to my union representative," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's your right. Let's go." At the gate, Maria was already showing her phone to an airline representative. "Your flight attendant told a dying child she wasn't her slave. You need to see this." The agent's face went white as he watched the footage. At Grady Memorial Hospital, Jessica was rushed into the emergency room. Andrea gave the doctor the briefing. 9-year-old, type 1 diabetic, severe hypoglycemia, glucose at 55. She's had some juice, and we started an IV of dextrose. The ER team swarmed, and Marcus was pushed to the side, utterly helpless. A nurse approached him. "Sir, are you the father?" "Yes, Marcus Harrison. We're going to take very good care of her." He could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. Back at the airport, news crews were already setting up. The story was breaking. Skyline Airlines flight makes emergency landing after alleged medical neglect. Within hours, it would be viral. Sarah Mitchell's face would be everywhere, and Marcus Harrison would be forced to decide how to respond. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Only Jessica mattered. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Have you ever had a moment, a single phone call that splits your life into a before and an after? Because that's what Dorothy's call did for Marcus Harrison. And what he does next is going to change an entire industry. If you want to know what happens to Jessica and how her father responds, hit that subscribe button right now, because the next part of this story will show you what real accountability looks like. 3 hours later, a private jet touched down at Atlanta's executive terminal. Marcus Harrison emerged, his tie loosened, his face a roadmap of the worst 3 hours of his life. He'd been in constant contact with the hospital. Jessica was stable but was being kept for observation. He ran through the corridors of Grady Hospital until he found her room. She was asleep, a thin IV line taped to her small arm, monitors beeping a steady, reassuring rhythm. He stood in the doorway, the tension finally draining from his shoulders. A nurse approached gently. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Keisha. Your daughter is stable. Her blood glucose levels are back to normal." Can I sit with her?" he asked, his voice raw. "Of course. She's been asking for you." Marcus sat beside her bed and took her small hand in his. Her eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" His voice broke again. "I'm here, baby girl. Daddy's here." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. "I was so scared. She wouldn't help me. I kept asking and asking." Marcus carefully pulled her into his arms. "I know, sweetheart. And I am so sorry I wasn't there. I tried to be brave like you said, but I was so scared." "You were brave," he whispered into her hair. "You were so brave. And the people around you, they stood up for you when that woman wouldn't." "But some people were mean," she sniffled. "They said I was being bad." Marcus closed his eyes, fury and heartbreak at war within him. "They were wrong. You weren't bad. You were sick and you asked for help. That is exactly what you were supposed to do." "Why didn't she help me, Daddy? The other kids got juice and cookies. Why not me?" He pulled back to look into her innocent, questioning eyes. "Sometimes, baby, people treat others differently because of how they look, and that is never ever okay." Her voice was impossibly small. "Because I'm black?" His throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. I wish I could tell you it was for any other reason, but yes." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "That's not fair." "No," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "It's not. But I promise you, I am going to do everything in my power to make sure this never happens to another little girl again." Her mother, Jennifer, burst into the room 2 hours later. The sight of Jessica in the hospital bed made her break, and she rushed to her daughter's side. "My baby, oh my baby." "Mom, I'm okay, Daddy's here." Jennifer looked at Marcus, her eyes red with tears and rage. "What happened? How could this happen?" In the hallway, he told her everything. The phone call, the flight attendant's refusal, the emergency landing. Jennifer's hands trembled with fury. "That woman let our baby suffer because she couldn't be bothered to open a beverage cart?" "It was worse than that, Jen. She told Jessica she wasn't her slave. Several passengers recorded it." Jennifer's face became a mask of cold fury. "I want her fired. I want her prosecuted." "She's already fired," Marcus said. "And I'm not done, not by a long shot." "I should have been with her," Jennifer whispered, a wave of guilt washing over her. "Stop. We both made the decision. We trusted the system to take care of her. The system failed her." "Your system," she said, the words hanging between them. "Yes," he acknowledged. "My system. And I'm going to fix it." An hour later, Marcus went down to the hospital lobby. Dorothy, Mr. Thompson, Maria, and Karen were all waiting. They stood as he approached. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my daughter's life." "Mr. Harrison," Dorothy said, "what I saw on that plane was unconscionable. That woman should never wear a uniform again." Mr. Thompson added, "Your daughter was incredibly brave, but she shouldn't have had to fight that hard for basic medical care." Maria held up her phone. "I have all of it on video, every word she said, the way she treated those white children compared to how she treated Jessica. It's damning." I'd like copies of everything if you're willing. Karen spoke hesitantly. Mr. Harrison, I'm so ashamed it took me so long to help. I should have spoken up sooner. You gave her your son's juice box, Marcus said, meeting her eyes. You helped when it mattered. Thank you. Dorothy looked at him directly. What are you going to do? About the airline, I mean. Marcus took a deep breath. Everything. I'm going to change everything. What happened to Jessica can never be allowed to happen again. Mr. Thompson nodded. The problem isn't just one flight attendant. It's training. It's culture. It's the fact that half that plane seemed to think she was in the right. I know, Marcus said. And that's what I'm going to fix. But I need your help, all of you. They all nodded. I want to build new training protocols, new emergency procedures, and I want the people who were actually there to be a part of designing them. Mr. Thompson smiled. As a retired paramedic, I'd be honored. People need to see this, Maria added. This isn't just about one racist flight attendant. It's about all the people who defended her. I'm holding a press conference tomorrow, Marcus said. I'd like you all to be there. The public needs to hear from the people who witnessed what happened. They agreed. As they were leaving, Richard, the passenger who had defended Sarah, approached nervously. Mr. Harrison, I wanted to apologize. I said some things on that plane. Things I deeply regret. I didn't understand how serious it was. Marcus studied him for a long moment. You didn't understand because you didn't believe a 9-year-old black girl when she told you she was sick. You assumed she was lying. You need to ask yourself why. Richard flushed with shame. I don't know, I thought she was being difficult. That assumption almost killed my daughter, Marcus said quietly. I hope you think about that. Richard left, his shoulders slumped. Dorothy watched him go. At least he had the courage to apologize. Marcus nodded slowly. Courage is what all of you showed on that plane. Standing up for a child you didn't know. Risking confrontation. Refusing to back down. That's real courage. Here's something I want you to think about. When someone apologizes only after the damage is done, after they've already chosen the wrong side, is that enough? Does saying sorry erase the harm? Drop your answer in the comments, because what comes next shows the difference between an apology and actual change. And if you want to see how Marcus Harrison transforms his daughter's nightmare into systematic change that will save lives across an entire industry, you need to subscribe right now. The press conference he's about to hold will shock you. The next morning, from a conference room in Jessica's hospital, Marcus held a video call with his board. I've reviewed the footage, read the statements, and I've looked at Sarah Mitchell's employment record. He pulled up her file on screen. 23 complaints in 18 months, 19 of them from passengers of color, and her supervisor, Tom Richards, dismissed every single one. The VP of Human Resources spoke up. Tom's been with us for 12 years. Protecting racist employees, Marcus cut her off. That's what the data shows. Sarah Mitchell is terminated, effective immediately. Tom Richards is suspended pending a full investigation. If he buried these complaints, he's gone too. The general counsel protested. She'll sue for wrongful termination. Let her sue, Marcus shot back. I will personally show a jury the video of my 9-year-old daughter begging for juice while Sarah told her she wasn't her slave. The CFO chimed in about financial impact. Marcus leaned into the camera. My daughter almost died on one of our planes. If you think I give a damn about quarterly earnings right now, you are profoundly mistaken. He then laid out his plan. Comprehensive medical emergency training for all 12,000 flight attendants, to be completed within 60 days. A 24/7 on-call medical hotline for all crews, a new system for passenger medical profiles, and mandatory intensive implicit bias training for every employee in this company. I am also establishing the Jessica Harrison Medical Emergency Fund. Any passenger who suffers a medical crisis on one of our flights will have their hospital bills covered. All of them. The CFO nearly choked. The insurance implications. I don't care. An older board member complained. This feels like we're calling all of our employees racist. Marcus's voice was ice. If this conversation makes you uncomfortable, there's the door. Silence. From beside him, Jessica spoke up, her voice small but clear. Daddy, are you really going to change the whole airline? He turned to her, his expression softening. Yes, baby. Because what happened to you should never happen to anyone. That afternoon, Marcus stood at a podium for the press conference. Behind him was a large, smiling photo of Jessica. 4 days ago, he began, my daughter, Jessica, asked a flight attendant for a carton of juice because her blood sugar was dangerously low. She was told, and I quote, "I am not your slave, young lady." Her blood glucose dropped to 55. She almost died. Passengers saved her life when our employee refused to do her job. Gasps filled the room. I am not here to make excuses. My company failed. We failed. But we are going to fix it. He then outlined every single change he had dictated to the board. A reporter shouted a question. Mr. Harrison, would you have done any of this if it hadn't been your daughter? The honest answer? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Sometimes it takes something deeply personal to see a systemic problem. That doesn't make it right, it just makes it human. Another reporter asked about discrimination. Passengers witnessed this flight attendant treating white children with warmth and kindness moments before treating my black daughter with contempt. She used language with a very specific, very ugly historical connotation. You can draw your own conclusions. Then, a video of Jessica appeared on the screen behind him. When someone asks for help, please believe them, she said. And for kids with diabetes, it's okay to speak up. You're just taking care of yourself. Dorothy also spoke. What happened on that plane is a mirror of what happens every single day in this country. Black people, and especially black women and children, being dismissed, disbelieved, and denied basic care. Marcus concluded the conference. We are going to honor my daughter's suffering by making sure it means something. The footage went viral. 6 months later, Jessica toured the brand new Skyline Medical Emergency Training Center. A flight attendant simulator showed her, because of you, every single one of us now knows how to handle a hypoglycemic event. Another approached her. I have a son with diabetes. This training didn't just make me a better flight attendant, it made me a better mom. Thank you. Marcus showed Jessica letters from hundreds of parents who now felt safe flying with his airline. A few weeks later, they finally took that family trip to Miami. The flight crew knew Jessica's name and her medical needs before she even boarded. As the plane took off, she looked at her dad and said, I'm not scared anymore, Daddy. 1 year after the incident, Skyline unveiled the Jessica Harrison Center for In-Flight Safety. The statistics were staggering. In 1 year, 362 medical emergencies had been successfully managed by Skyline crews, with 0 fatalities. Jessica, now 10, stood at the podium and addressed the crowd. Everybody has the power to change things. You just have to choose to help, choose to speak up, treat people like they matter, because they do. She received a standing ovation. Afterward, Richard found her. I volunteered with diabetes organizations all year, he said quietly. I'm learning, and I am so sorry. Jessica gave him a small, genuine smile. Thank you for learning. A moment later, a mother gripped Jessica's hands, her eyes filled with tears. The crew on my flight last month, your new training, they saved my son's life during an asthma attack. That night, Jessica wrote in her journal, something bad happened to me, but I got to decide what it meant. One person's cruelty doesn't define the world. How we respond to it is what defines us. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. We'll see you in our next video.